Here are some extracts from Lee's diary. It's pretty typical that I should start my journal nearly a week late and during the minutes allotted to the dissolving of a glycerin suppository in my backside, a nervous-making procedure designed to remove food, also from last week, so this starts as a general purging. My first day arrival. First saw land at the Needles through bursts of rain and felt most uneasy and nervous. Quite unexpectedly, Roland loomed up at the bar table and we looked longingly at each other during the endless fiddling. Went shiny-eyed through customs and was very impressed by the world's oldest and biggest rolls acting as a taxi on the quay. Wonder if Roland really did tell the policeman I was ill. Sandwiches in a pub and a long drive to London, feeling rather dried up from too much brandy all day. Dinner immediately with Man Ray, talked mostly to Mezins, who was very stimulating. All went back to Hampstead, where Man was also spending the night. Love, sleep, and breakfast led to the Picasso show at the London Gallery, lunch, and Man's airplane departure from the Dorchester, where the WC woman is simply like a duchess, as compared to the French ones who seem to be ex-bordel keepers or whores, always fat, jolly, and chummy. Was very damned cold and damp, but saw Roland's show at Freddie Mayer's, renewed acquaintance with Freddie, and various reminiscences.
Isn't it funny how
Hey.
mispronouncing French words makes you like French names makes you mispronounce francophone sort of words that
Yeah,
have come into English? Yeah.
reminiscences.
That is a tough one. Reminiscences is a that is a little say it five times fast. No, actually don't. You're doing
Yeah.
great, Abby. How are you doing? We're into hour three here on this core episode of Art of Darkness. How are
Oh
you feeling,
man.
Abby? Are you doing
Uh,
okay? You having a
I
good
am
time?
doing all right. Yes, I may have to go and refill some water.
Yeah, why don't you get a little break and I will tease the
I
book
will.
club a little bit.
Yes.
We're having political assassinations here in the state of Minnesota, so that's very exciting. And I'm very close to the Capitol down here in Art of Darkness Studio West. My Poke Bowl never came, so I'm a little frustrated by that. But you don't really care about that. It's all right. Thanks again for being an Art of Darkness listener. We love all of you. Please, if you have a request, if you want us to think about a subject we haven't covered for, I guess, season six. This is season five right now. We will be doing season six. I feel like Abby and I have settled into a nice routine. Abby's doing a great job, crushing it. We do have book club for the patrons, Patreon and Substack patrons. That's where you can come hang out with us if you want briefly, or you can just listen back. It's extra content. So the rest of book club this year, we're going to be doing. We've got two more book clubs in September. We're going to be reading "Someone Like You" by Roald Dahl. Abby, did you cover book club stuff, or did you just talk
I
about
did,
the?
yes.
Oh, Abby already did this. But then let me say too, I'm really excited about Iceman Cometh and
Hmm.
Eugene O'Neill. I'm really excited about doing the O'Neill episode. He's sort of obviously one of the most important American playwrights, and a wonderful drunk, a great alcoholic, and that'll be a lot of fun to cover O'Neill. Obviously, we won't have to go looking that far for the darkness. There, Abby, did you get your refill?
I did indeed.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
And where, yeah, of course. And if you ever need to do that, just, I can vamp with the best of them, Abby. You know that. I'll send three, four, five letters. I don't give a damn if you reply. At a certain point, I start talking to myself, believe it or not. And,
Dear Kevin.
dear Kevin, shut up. Yeah. But where are you at with Miller now? Like in your research and everything. I mean, were you shocked? There's a lot of like cinematic moments happening, and it's
There
yeah.
are. I think I had already anecdotally known about most of them. Um, I yeah, it's interesting to see somebody with such itchy feet, I think, and her obsessions and how that how the how the chaos of her personality just sort of affects other people. So there's when she would become obsessed with things, I didn't mention this earlier, they were known as jags. So she had a photography jag or a traveling jag, and it was just like things that she would momentarily just delve her whole being into, and then once she was done with it, she's done with it.
She had a husband, Jag.
She had a husband, Jag. Yeah.
Got it.
Studio
Cool.
Jag.
That's
Yeah.
her. I mean, that's her style. That's a certain way of doing things for sure. I can relate to that certainly. It's
Um,
all or nothing.
it's it's also just amazing how enchanted people are by her. Everybody, even though she can have a little bit of a prickly disposition sometimes. So yeah, I like her a lot, but yeah, like she can be a bit selfish, but I think you maybe don't get to where she's got to without being a bit selfish.
She feels selfish and self-aware. It doesn't feel like she's this narcissist sort of wandering around like
No,
damaging people. It
no, no,
feels like,
no, of course not.
yeah, yeah. She feels more like she's like, she knows what she's worth. She knows she's a woman up against this world.
Mm.
She wants certain things. She knows what she has, but she knows the limitations too. I mean, maybe she's not afraid to use men, but it seems like she finds the one who's willing to do it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, she seemed to maintain good relationships with all of them. Like even Man Ray, he's in the last few paragraphs has been mentioned as going to dinner with her or staying at the apartment the flat that she shares with Roland while they're both there. So they still have a good relationship. She would maintain a good relationship with Aziz for the rest of her life.
You really can remain friends with lovers, though. I It requires a certain amount of sophistication, and you have to be able to talk and communicate clearly.
Hmm.
Not easy, not the easiest thing. Yeah.
No.
Sometimes you have to write some letters.
Sometimes you have to write some letters, but I think it depends on the person. You don't have to remain friends with all of them, but some you can.
Boundaries are good. Yeah, and
Boundaries are good.
you have to feel your feelings. Definitely.
Yes.
And I say that to the boys out there. I say that as a,
Feel
you
those
know,
feelings
feel your feelings, boys. Right? You don't always have
in
to
a
push it down.
healthy way.
You don't always have to push it down with Brown. Right? You can sometimes sober up and feel your feelings once in a while. God bless you all. Good luck out there.
So Roland and Lee would make a trip to France to visit their friends, their surrealist friends. But then Hitler invaded Poland, and they had to go back to the UK because that's not safe. Um, when they were in St. Malo, they had to abandon their car to the care of the AA and take a passenger ferry to Southampton. And when they arrived in London, there was some mail awaiting Lee with a strongly worded letter from the US Embassy saying that if she wasn't on the next ship to the US, they wouldn't be able to get her out before World War II had fully erupted. And she tore up the letter, certain that the next adventure was going to be too good to miss. So, now it's time for the Blitz. Lee and Roland had settled in Hampstead, which is in London. Determined to reclaim her artistic identity, she approached Vogue and offered her services as a photographer. Initially, she was dismissed due to her professional hiatus and the dominance of Cecil Beaton, who Lee did not get along well with. Also, there was a war going on, and they just weren't publishing as much as they previously had. But her persistence paid off. She did what every boomer tells you to do, and she turned up daily, unpaid, and made herself indispensable. Eventually, as staff left to join the war effort, a space opened up, and She was offered a staff position, but she decided to stay freelance. Her early assistant assignments were mundane, usually portraits of society women, handbag shoots, and maternity wear, but they helped her to reestablish a professional rhythm and introduced her to collaborators like Roland Haupt, whose talent she mentored. I think he was one of the like darkroom assistants at Vogue, and she mentored him into actual photography. Downshire Hill, the which was the name of the home in Hampstead that she shared with Penrose, became a hub of wartime bohemianism. Despite the chaos of the Blitz, it hosted lively parties of artists, intellectuals, and expatriates. When while Roland came from a proper Quaker background, Lee transformed his world with flair and irreverence, hosting wild soirees even during the air raids. Their guests included not just British surrealists, but visiting Americans like the photographer Dave Sherman, who would become significant in Lee's life. This is from Dave Sherman himself. I was assigned immediately to join the beleaguered Life London Bureau and soon met the already legendary Lee Miller. 25 years old and a brash and bumptious squirt, I had the eternal good fortune to be invited by Roland to visit his house in Hampstead. Its walls were completely covered with what I thought were absolutely first-rate copies of the works of Picasso, Braque, Miro, Tanguay, and De Chirico, Brancusi, Giacometti, Tounard, Max Ernst, René Magritte, and a dozen by Roland himself. Only they were not copies, Lee explained to me patiently. They were originals. And what's more, they were merely the ones Roland wanted to keep near him. The main body of his collection was hidden away safely out of the Blitz in Devon. The house was mind-boggling, and so were Roland and Lee's regular soirees, the guest lists of which read like a who's who of modern art, journalism, British politics, music, and even espionage. Though we didn't know about the latter until many years later. Communists, liberals, and Tories drank and jostled one another in an amicable melange that will never be seen again. Roland Penrose, in addition to his duties as a lecturer on camouflage, was also doing a stint as an air raid warden. One evening early in the Blitz, Lee joined him on his rounds. It was a beautiful moonlit night, and the docks were taking a fearful pounding. From Hampstead, the crisscrossing searchlights, bursting flak, and the glow from the fires presented an astonishing panorama made more awesome by the skull-splitting din of guns and aircraft. During a particularly ferocious moment, as spent ammunition clattered around them, Lee grabbed Roland's arm and spun him round to face her. Eyes blazed with ecstasy, she gasped, oh, darling, aren't you excited?" One of the first visitors to Downshire Hill was Roland's estranged wife, Valentine, a surreal poet and author. She had tried to return from the Himalayas to her parents in Gascony, but the war intervened, stranding her in London. Roland's made...
Hey, so go back and read that. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to bark orders at you, but can you just for me, indulge me, just go back and read from Roland's estranged wife. read that para one more time for me, please.
One of the first visitors to Downshire Hill was Roland's estranged wife, Valentine, a surrealist poet and author. She had tried to return from the Himalayas to her parents in Gascony.
Like what? It's just like it's giving Wes Anderson. Do you know what I mean? It's giving. I understand what all those words mean individually, but my peasant ass from the Midwest. Like, do I really understand that? I don't think I really understand what's going on
um, the war intervened and she was stranded in London. Roland made no secret of his relationship with Lee, so she was apprehensive about meeting her. A rendezvous was arranged at a pub near the house called the Freemasons' Arms. As Roland's arrival was delayed, Lee went along and, recognizing Valentine from her portrait, managed to start a conversation with her. When Roland arrived, Valentine leaped to her feet, saying how glad she was that he'd turned up at last, as she'd heard that Lee Miller, who of course she did not want to meet, might be arriving any minute. But I exclaimed, that's Lee you're talking to. In answer to which came Valentine's spontaneous exclamation, "Oh, but she's wonderful." This auspicious accident, which could never have happened with such candor had it been planned, was the beginning of a close and lasting friendship which astonished me and brought great pleasure. In truth, this friendship was nowhere near as close as Roland so fondly imagined it to be, because he loved both these women so passionately it never occurred to him that they should not love each other. The relationship between Lee and Valentine was more an armed truce than a friendship. Lee was unfailingly generous towards Valentine, who maintained an air of distant politeness in return. When Valentine's hotel was bombed, Lee insisted that she should move into the spare room at the top of the house in Downshire Hill. There she remained through the worst of the bombing, writing her surrealist poetry. It was more than a year before she left to become. She joined the Free French Army and went to serve in Algiers.
There you are. Very good. A live, active translation
Yeah.
from Abbie Lucas. That's what you get on a core episode of Art of Darkness. By the way, a free core episode. This is all free. You
Yes.
can take it or leave it. Yeah, if you want to support us, if you like what we do, though, we've already told you how you can do that. Okay, but this is free. Those are the kind of tricks that you can get on a core episode. Like I watched your gears turn in real time here, Abbie. Very good. Well done.
I wasn't going to say the French. That was some complicated French. Anyway, the Blitz brought about a turning point in Lee's photographic practice. While British Vogue largely avoided overt war coverage, Lee began pushing to document the devastation honestly. She photographed the aftermath of bombings, including the destruction of the Vogue Patton House. In 1941, she began working on Grim Glory, a photo book aimed at American audiences that showcased the resilience of Britons under siege. This marked a shift towards more personal, direct photojournalism that aligned with her surrealist instincts and political conscience. Yet Miller was frustrated with how her photographs were often accompanied by trite or sentimental captions. She believed the writing undermined the power of her pictures and began advocating to write her own stories. Her intelligence, photographic skill, and growing reputation eventually earned her an AGO card, an essential pass that allowed her to cover frontline stories, a rare privilege for women. So she could get this journalism card as an American, while the British weren't going to let her cover, go to war as a journalist because she was a woman. Her early photojournalism included thoughtful, empathetic portraits of U.S. Army nurses and British Wrens, often collaborating with Dave Sherman, who supported her technically and creatively. As her assignments grew more daring, so did her conviction that she should be doing more serious work. One dramatic shoot involved photographing ATS women at a searchlight battery in London, an assignment that turned dangerous when enemy fire broke out mid-shoot. Though the images were striking and widely published, Miller clashed with the editors over the accompanying text, which she felt lacked depth and respect for her subjects. These tensions pushed her to write her own copy, insisting that words and images should work together to honor the truth of what she witnessed. In these years before she officially became a war correspondent, Lee Miller was already carving out a space in a male-dominated field, blending style and substance in a way few others could. Her time in London was one of transformation from sideline model and muse to assertive independent artist determined to shape her own narrative.
There it is. And there it is. There's the big turn, right? I think. She was sort of maybe dabbling a little bit before, or like, yeah, it sounds like she could have just stayed in New York and had a commercial studio and been perfectly successful, but she didn't want to.
She didn't want to. So now we get into Lee Miller's war. I think next season I'm going to avoid World War II.
She doesn't fuck a Nazi, does she?
She doesn't fuck a Nazi.
Okay,
No,
all right.
no,
Okay,
she
okay,
does
okay.
not. She does not fuck a Nazi. But
That we know of. Like,
no, no, I don't.
okay,
I don't
okay.
think. I don't think she would fuck a Nazi.
I went right there. I was trying to figure out why are you going to avoid World War II, Abby? Good luck, by the way.
I'm kind of tired of it.
You're tired of. Are you telling me you're exhausted? With the war that happened 80 years ago that seems to never end.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
3 for 3 now. World War II.
It was a very important war.
I know.
This
But
is good though. I like that.
there's some
Season.
very important art that was not done
Yes,
in the time of World
absolutely.
War II.
That's correct. It's just so tough because that period still defines our world, of course.
Mm.
Abby, how aggressively do you want me to police your schedule for season 6?
How do you
Can I
mean?
allow you one? Well, when we do our season scheduling, do
Hmm.
you want me to say, like when we plan next, November or December, when we plan next year, do you want me to say, World War II? Or do you want me to say you get one?
I mean, maybe something like that. Yeah.
One. You get
One World
one.
War II.
You get one person who is going to be impacted by the war to end all wars. Or was that World War One? Anyway, it's all been one war since World War One. Let's say
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
We're still in a war. All right, good. Make a note of that and keep us honest, dear beloved listeners.
Yeah.
Keep us honest. Find me in the Discord at artofdarkpod.com/discord. Listen, maybe we can make an arrangement where if we surpass a certain amount of donations, in Patreon, subscribers, maybe Abby will join the Discord. But I would have to talk with her in the green room
I
and sort
mean,
of. I'd
maybe
have to write her.
I still curse your name every day because of the spam I receive on Telegram.
I have had Abby. I will go to Abby and go, hey, do you want to come here? She's like, I don't want to download another app, Kevin. And guess what? She's right. Anyway, but I am on Discord, and I, we have a great time there. I love hearing from people. So, but you get one. Now, I am going to take no such. I'm not putting any sort of boundaries on what I will do.
Yeah,
So
it's just all World War II all the time.
it's all just going to be, artists who, killed or died in World War II. I don't know. Anyway, so now we're at Lee Miller's War.
Lee Miller's World War, because we will have covered the war from the perspective of every artist at some point. Okay. So in July 1944, Lee Miller was sent by Vogue to cover nurses at the field hospitals in Normandy, returning with powerful images and over 10,000 words of reportage that transformed her reputation and gave Vogue a serious wartime presence.
Okay, hey, hang on. I know, but so from the cover to reporting in Vogue,
Yeah.
wild, wild.
Her work resonated deeply with the magazine's editors, helping to dispel their sense of frivolity during the wartime. Soon after, Miller was sent to St. Malo to report on post-combat civilian life, but the battle there was still raging. She found herself alone among journalists, documenting the siege from dangerous vantage points, even helping wounded civilians when needed. Her striking report on the napalm attack was partially censored, and she was placed under house arrest for violating her accreditation. During her confinement, she typed another 10,000-word article that Vogue published in October 1944. After her release, Lee made her way to liberated Paris, switching from war reporting to fashion at the behest of Vogue. And this is from the Lives of Lee Miller book. Lee's immediate concern was to visit her old friends, and her first stop was near the Place de l'Odéon, where she found the painter Christian Berard and the ballet impresario Boris Kochno. They had, when they had stopped hugging each other, she went to Kochno, sorry. Kochno She went with Kochno to Picasso's studio. They fell into each other's arms, Picasso declaring, "This is the first Allied soldier I've seen, and it's you." Becoming a soldier, he had said, made her so different from the pink and yellow portrait she had painted 7 years before in the Antibes, and he would have to paint her again. In the bistro next door, Lee added her K rations to the lunch, which was also well boosted with large quantities of wine and brandy. Picasso wanted to gossip endlessly about English painters and people he'd lost track of. He was particularly amused to hear that Roland Penrose was involved in camouflage, so speculating that the results would be like something out of a Marx Brothers film. So Lee had gone to Paris in her army fatigues. She immersed herself in post-liberation Parisian life, moving into the Hotel Scribe, the press headquarters, which she transformed into a chaotic mix of photo lab, writing space, and storeroom. Lee struggled with writing, often procrastinating until deadlines loomed. One of us. A process which she called boondoggling. Boondoggling. She was supported by Dave Sherman, who was moved into an adjoining room. Despite the emotional toll her process took, he remained by her side with devotion. Lee's room overflowed with war mementos, lighting gear, and ration boxes, her makeshift base of operations. In case it wasn't apparent before, Dave Sherman, who she'd met in London, became one of her lovers, but was living at the flat with her and Roland and Valentine because, surrealism.
Yeah. You just get exactly. Yeah, because sexual surrealism is underrated and under-discussed.
Yeah. Anyway, so Dave Sherman's at war with her now. They've gone to war together.
Okay.
Though she resisted interference from Vogue's editors, she escaped briefly to cover 20,000 German troops surrendering to her pals in the 83rd Division at Beaugency on the Loire. She also scooped the meeting in Louis Aragon's flat where Maurice Chevalier exonerated himself from the charges of collaboration. Eventually, she fulfilled her duty to support French Vogue and covered the first post-liberation couture shows, bridging the worlds of war and fashion in her unique, extraordinary way. So when she'd come to the liberation of Paris, she wanted to continue being on the front with all the soldiers and things like that. But British Vogue were like, oh no, you have to help French Vogue get up and running again and cover all the new fashion that was coming out of France post liberation. And
yeah, there
and
was
so
some
she
new.
did.
I heard there were a lot of new haircuts.
Yes. Yeah, that is covered in the Lee movie with Kate Winslet. There was some collaborator haircutting that went on.
Horizontal
Yeah,
collaborators. Yeah.
horizontal collaborators. She took some photographs of it.
Ah, interesting.
Yes. So yeah, she did help. She did help French Vogue get back up off the ground again, but she managed to get out of that. In the final days of the war in Europe, Lee and Dave followed General Patton's forces into Nuremberg and swiftly arrived at the 6th Army press camp, where they were tipped off about the imminent liberation of the Dachau concentration camp. That evening, Rainbow Company of the 45th Division stormed to the camp, and by the next morning, Lee and Dave were amongst the first journalists to enter. The horrors they encountered defied belief. Even Lee, hardened by years covering conflict, was left speechless and numb. Some GIs and fellow reporters were so unprepared for the scale of the brutality that they thought the camp might be an elaborate fake. But the evidence was all too real. Heaps of starved and diseased bodies, skeletal survivors barely clinging to life, and a smell so pervasive and sickening that it haunted all those who experienced it. The crematoriums had run out of fuel days earlier, leaving bodies to rot in the open ground. Prisoners had torn some SS guards apart. Others, SS guards, disguised in civilian clothing, were betrayed by their healthier parents and captured. Lee was moved to document everything. In a telegram to her editor, she wrote, "I implore you to believe this is true," desperate to bear witness to the atrocity. Despite her combat uniform, the prisoners quickly recognized her as a woman, watching her with awe and reverence. When she offered chocolate from her rations, it sparked a frenzy, and Dave had to pull her clear. In one hut, prisoners respectfully made room for a photograph by removing the body of someone who had just died, an act of both heartbreak and quiet dignity. Relief supplies were rushed in, but many prisoners were too emaciated to tolerate solid food, and some died from eating too much too soon. That night in Munich, Lee and Dave wrangled a billet in the command post of the 45th Division at Prince Regentenplatz 27.
Prince Regentenplatz? Is that what you're saying?
Prince Regentenplatz.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to see the word, but yes. Abbie,
yeah.
You're a trooper. You're a trooper. You're doing great. Abbie, next year, it's all artists from New Zealand or London. can we get the one? Well, the one director is still, yeah. Anyway, no, yeah,
Yeah,
huh, fun.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was an old-fashioned building on the corner which showed no outward signs that anybody more elevated than a merchant or retired clergyman lived there, so it seemed an unlikely setting for one of Lee and Dave's biggest scoops. The impression of ordinariness continued inside with the furnishings and decor that could have belonged to anyone with a moderate income and no heirlooms. Only the swastika combined with the AH monogram on the silver gave it away as Hitler's house. In this banal setting, the leader of the Third Reich had lived and conferred with Chamberlain, Franco, Mussolini, Goebbels, Goering, Laval, and a host of others. The elaborate telephone switchboard in the aide's adjoining flat was still connected, so Lee and Dave found a German-speaking US officer, Lieutenant Colonel Grace, and asked him to call the operator, who was in another as yet uncaptured section of the town. Hoping for a quote from the Führer, they demanded a connection with Berchtesgaden. Berchtesgaden. The phone rang and a voice at the other end answered. Then, evidently, because the correct password was not forthcoming, the call was instantly cut off and the whole switchboard went dead. Lee's first thought was to hop into the enormous bathtub and enjoy her first scrub for weeks. Dave took a photograph of her with her muddy combat boots parked on the bath mat. Later, they set up a spoof shot of a GI lounging on Hitler's bed reading Mein Kampf while talking on the field telephone. The picture of Lee in the bath, which is an extremely famous picture, made a full page in Life magazine and brought Dave one of his greatest accolades of his career. In fact, that picture might be the thing that she is most famous for, of her in Hitler's bathtub. There's a picture of Hitler in the background that they've set up, and there's her like boots with all of the mud of the Dachau concentration camp, like messing up the bath mat. And what they didn't know at the time was that Hitler and Eva Braun had committed suicide in Berlin.
Wow. Yeah, I'm looking at that photo now. Yeah, there's a sort of yeah, maybe I have a one-track mind, but I don't think I do. There is a Lynchian quality to that photo. It's very odd.
Yeah.
There's this like a statue of what Venus, there's like a nude woman over here on the other side, and it's sort of offset in the foreground, and Hitler's in the background. They're facing one another, and Lee's in the miller, or in the miller, and Lee's in the tub facing the Austrian. And yeah, what a photo. Hmm. Cool.
As souvenirs, Lee carried off autographed volumes of Mein Kampf, thank you letters to Frau Winter, Hitler's housekeeper, and endless oddments, including a photograph of Hitler, which she asked everyone in the command post to sign. A few blocks away, they explored Eva Braun's villa. Lee napped briefly on her bed, noting the unease of lying in the space once occupied by a woman whose complicity and loyalty had cost so many lives. Then, acting on another tip, they drove to Salzburg to witness the fall of Berchtesgaden, Hitler's fabled Alpine stronghold. Among the treacherous roads, Dave liberated a Mercedes convertible from a Hungarian official, naming it Ludmilla and driving it for years. The Eagle's Nest, Hitler's mountain retreat, was easily overrun. The SS torched it and fled, leaving GIs to swarm the site. Amid looting and celebration, Lee and Dave captured the fire, consuming the Reich's symbolic heart. Inside the underground complex, they discovered a vast network of tunnels and stolen treasures. Lee took a silver tray marked with Hitler's monogram. Dave carried away Shakespeare in German with Hitler's bookplate. The spoils of tyranny became footnotes in their personal histories. Later, as they worked on their reports in a schoolhouse in Rosenheim, a soldier walked in with history's punctuation mark. Germany had surrendered. The war in Europe was over. Lee barely looked up over her typewriter, then cursed. That's blown my first paragraph. Yeah, there was a few places that they had stopped on the way before they'd got to Dachau. And other war photographers would complain that they would just be getting to a place as Lee and Dave were leaving. They always seemed to be ahead of the curve when it came to bits that they were corresponding on. during the like final days of World War II. But Lee would continue to have itchy feet post-war. After the armistice, Lee Miller and her follow correspondents were left deflated. The intense focus and purpose that had driven them during the war vanished. Assigned to cover Danish fashion and social life, Lee photographed peaceful scenes, landscapes, markets, and families in the Tivoli Gardens, possibly in search of relief from the trauma she'd witnessed, but her writing revealed deep disarray and had to be heavily edited to make sense. Returning to London, she was warmly celebrated at Vogue with the managing director, Harry Yoxall, praising her talent and courage. He said, "Who else has written equally well about GIs and Picasso? Who else can get the death of Saint Malo and the rebirth of the fashion salons? Who else can swing from the Siegfried line one week to the new hip line the next?" He went on to pay a tribute to Audrey Withers, her assistant Grace Young, and the art department in the studio, but he could not resist implying that it had been Vogue's initiative to send Lee to picture the world at war, which was not the case. Lee's relationship with Roland was now strained. Though they still loved each other, her emotional state had changed profoundly. He hoped to ground her, but she no longer fit into the life they shared. "I'm not Cinderella. I can't force my foot into the glass slipper," she would say, stretching Roland's liberal ideas to the limit by demanding that he should understand motives which she herself found incomprehensible. Volatile tension simmered, and by the end of August, flashpoint was reached. After an acrimonious, passionate, door-slamming row, Lee walked out. Back in Paris, Lee experienced a severe psychological breakdown. She'd become dependent on Benzedrine to function in the mornings and needed alcohol or sleeping pills to sleep at night. Some mornings, the foul, black, winged serpents that flapped slowly around her were unconquerable, and she would weep alone in bed all day. Her inner world was dominated by depression and haunting imagery. Dave Sherman, her wartime companion, became her lifeline. His humor helped her reconnect with herself and gradually claw her way out of the worst of the depression. In a brief period of clarity, she wrote a long emotional letter to Roland explaining her state of mind, but she never sent it. "Darling Roland, I haven't forgotten you. Every evening when I could take the time and certainly have the interest to write to you, I think that tomorrow I'll know the ultimate answer, or that my depression will have lifted, or my exaltation ebbed, or whatever, so that I'll be able to write you a more coherent impression containing some sort of decision, whether it be that I'm staying or coming home licked. That moment never comes. You've known that for years already. Either I have had a diarrhea of words or a constipation. When the invasion occurred, the impact of the decision itself was a tremendous release. All my energy and my prefabricated opinions were unleashed together. I worked well and consistently, and I hope convincingly as well as honestly. Now I'm suffering from a sort of verbal impotence. When there was a necessity for stopping being afraid, like you knew how cowardly I was during the Blitz, I could and did. This is a new and disillusioning world. Peace with a world of crooks who have no honor, no integrity, and no shame is not what anyone fought for. One Christmas morning, I was wakened by the news of an assassination. Admiral Darlin. Do you remember? I stopped being sick, and the man came by with a coffin, and I started laughing. And everything was all right from then on, because I knew that we weren't fighting for anything any of us wanted anyway, and it didn't matter. We were just stuck with it, like always. Then I saw the guys who were grey or bloody or black, the boys who were white with anger or green with fatigue, and sometimes shook because they were afraid. I was awfully sorry that the war wasn't for anything at all, and I was very angry. Really great groups of humans are suffering the same shock symptoms caused by peace that I'm combating, and I don't in the least mean the boys going back home to find that they've become dependent upon a benevolent maternal army, that they have outgrown their wives or become socially unfit or drunks or misanthropes. It's just an impatience with the sordid dirt which is being slung around now compared with the comparative cleanliness and real nobility of the men in the lines, or men and women in the lousy little jobs they thought were helping to win the war, and the people who bought bonds that were so that the disreputable government could continue after the war loan had been paid off, the families who are still short of rations so that a lot of grasping bastards with greedy, gloating appetites should have enough schlang on their coffee. A more disorganized, dissolute, and dishonest population has never existed in the history books. My room and my affairs are a hopeless mess, and I'm incapable of sorting them out. However, they hang over me and depress me all the time. Paul doesn't answer his phone, nor Picasso, nor Dora. The whole town is closed down and everything is shut, not only for August, but also for a series of VJ days alternating with Assumption days, etc. I'm leaving for this Austrian trip tomorrow morning, Saturday at dawn, with a great deal of dread and boredom. Davy is hanging around waiting for me to get off because he knows that if he doesn't, I'll never leave. Love, Lee. So that was a letter that she never sent to him. Her failure to send it led to a 7-month silence that deeply hurt Roland. At this point, she regarded him more as a past attachment than someone she was still building a future with. She even proposed a professional partnership with Dave in America, unaware he thought she and Roland were still solid. Lee went on to Salzburg, covering the chaotic and spirited post-war music festival. The city was full of Allied soldiers, and despite its disarray, music brought people together across languages and nationalities. The festival was pulled together by a young Czech woman with a background in espionage who managed to assemble a strong lineup despite logistical chaos and lingering Nazi affiliations among some of the performers. After Salzburg, she headed to Vienna with a fellow journalist, navigating complicated checkpoints, odd signage, and light-headed sexism from American troops. The journey was a mix of bureaucratic absurdity and physical challenge, mirroring the
Wait.
disordered state.
Was that lighthearted sexism?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's like the yeah, that's like the
casual
fun.
sexism.
Sure, casual sexism. That's like the fun racism that's still allowed at casinos. If you go to like a casino and there they'll have like the
Casinos!
yeah, they'll have the slot machines are still wicked racist. They'll have like the dancing, leprechaun, and then there'll be like the dan
Oh, right.
the Chinese ones are all dragons, and they're
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the Mexican beans, you go, oh, it's like
Yeah.
fun racist. It's like fun racist caricatures, and casinos for some reason are one of the only places that that's sort of still very strange. Just saying.
Like, well, if these beans are giving me money.
I caramba. I love my magic beans. It's funny because it's like it's a bit of a boys will be boys thing, right? These
Mm.
soldiers just won the war and freed us from, tyranny. So yeah, we can have a little lighthearted sexism, right? There you go.
Vienna was a fractured city divided into 5 zones of occupation: Soviet, French, American, British, and an internationally controlled zone, which was the most chaotic. The occupying forces vied for influence with petty rivalries and logistical gamemanship, and the cleverest being the imposition of 3 different time zones, which meant Lee was often hours early or late for everything. Bureaucracy thrived. Every permit had to be issued in quadruplicate, yet often expired before the necessary signatures could be gathered. The military had commandeered every hotel, and bayoneted guards stood at entrances regardless of the building's former status. Light music drifted through the streets, saccharine and jarring in a city gripped by hunger. Malnutrition was rife, fish and meat was scarce, and only the American troops had reliable supplies. Others, like some resourceful Russian soldiers, fished ornamental ponds in public gardens. One even shot a carp with his revolver when nets failed. But the gravest shortage was in medicine. Hospitals were pristine but useless, well equipped in form but devoid of essential drugs. Lee visited a children's hospital and cabled this to Audrey Withers, who was the editor of Vogue. British Vogue. For an hour, I watched a baby die. He was dark blue when I first saw him. He was the dark, dusty blue of these waltz-filled Vienna nights, the same color as the striped garb of the Dachau skeletons, the same imaginary blue as Strauss's Danube. I thought all babies looked alike, but that was healthy babies. There are many faces for the dying. This wasn't a 2 months baby. He was a skinny gladiator. He gasped and fought and struggled for life, and a doctor and a nun and I just stood there and watched. There was nothing to do. In this beautiful children's hospital with its nursery-rhymed walls and screenless windows, with its clean white beds, its brilliant surgical instruments and empty drug cupboards, there was nothing to do but watch him die. Baring his sharp, toothless gums, he clenched his fists against the attack of death. This tiny baby fought for his only possession, life, as if it might be worth something, and as if there weren't 1,000 more right there on the doorstep of the hospital waiting for a bed as an arena for their losing battle. At this point in Lee's notebook, her pencil slashed at the paper as her rage boiled over. This is a silly, fatuous, stupid town. It's not evil, wicked, or tragic. Tragedy is the fate of the undeserving, not the earned justice of wicked Nazis.
So two things. One, if you, and I don't mean you, Abby, but if the listeners in Radioland, if you haven't watched The Third Man, you have to watch The Third Man. About that's set in this kind of period in Vienna, maybe a little later, but similar time. Orson Welles, all of that, the cuckoo clock monologue. Pretty widely regarded as like one of the greatest British films of all time. And then, do we know how this baby died?
They just didn't have the drugs to give to him. I don't know if it was an
That's so
infection
sad.
or, yeah.
Jeez. Abby, you have delivered in this Lee Miller episode two of the most profoundly dark moments of the podcast, going all the way back to the beginning, and some of the worst
Wow.
and some of the worst pronunciations.
Thank you. I try my best.
Listen, you got to commit to the bit. And you are committing to the bit, and I admire you for that. But yeah, the molestation leading to an STI at 7. Fuck. And then this baby. Oh, I mean, never mind, of course, the camps and everything, but my word. Anyway, okay, well, this is Art of Darkness.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you see why I'm sick of World War II now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something to think about. Okay.
Um, after Vienna, while she was in Vienna, she was waiting for permits to allow her to go to Hungary, which Vogue was obtaining for her, but they were taking a little while to come through. So her permits came through on the 25th of October. She packed up a Chevrolet, loaded in Varum, who was a kitten that she had acquired from the streets, and 2 passengers, and against all advice, drove across the battered landscape towards the Hungarian border, uncertain whether she was ready to leave Vienna, but knowing she needed to keep moving. Lee Miller's elation at finally reaching Budapest after a long and hazardous journey is captured in an unpublished letter to a friend. Her passage included run-ins with Russian guards, a forced detour, and a dramatic moment where she accidentally bloodied a soldier's nose during a bumpy ride. Though exhausted, she was deeply moved by the beauty of Budapest rising across the Danube and just devastated by the death of her cat Varum, who had been her constant companion. Despite arriving to bleak conditions at the Bristol Hotel, she found comfort among fellow American military personnel and eventually moved to a convent turned press camp on Stefania UT. Her letter reflects the emotional toll of the journey, a sense of achievement, and her trademark humor and resilience. In Budapest, she met Robert Halmy, the son of a jailed photographer, and recruited him as her assistant. He later recalled her as fearless, masculine, and a heavy drinker with a wicked sense of humor. Their presence at the convent caused continual friction with the Mother Superior, culminating in a mass eviction of all journalists after one was caught with a prostitute. Meanwhile, Budapest was still recovering from a brutal siege. Its bridges were destroyed, homes shattered, and the bunkers filled with refugees. Lee's fashion piece for Vogue, allegedly showcasing post-siege style, was seen by Halmy as mostly fabricated, but it became an opportunity to highlight beauty amidst the ruins. He would say, "The Russian battle with the Germans had left half the city in ruins. The story was bullshit. I found the girls I knew, and any rag on them became fashion. The girls were so pretty the fashions didn't matter. I was with Lee around the clock. I was not attracted to her. She was too masculine for a young Hungarian. She wore those baggy army slacks most of the time and she drank too much. She was an excellent photographer and she knew what she was doing. She was also absolutely fearless. She probably would have been raped 100 times if the Russians hadn't thought she was a boy. And she had a marvelous sense of humor. It was one of her best features. We got to be good friends and I took her home every night when she got loaded. It wasn't easy going at the convent. Lee had given the nuns lipstick and silk stockings, and Marguerite Schlachter, the Mother Superior, strongly objected. She said, "You don't do that in a convent." I said that we didn't know. There was hysterics when one of the nuns came into Lee's room one morning and found me astride her, rubbing her back as she laid in bed. I was trying to revive her, and I did this every morning. She had discovered she could get out of a hangover this way, and she preferred it. Schlachter told us, "We don't do that either," in Hungarian, of course. I told her, "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I've never lived in a convent." Before dawn on the 10th of January 1946, Lee Miller and fellow photojournalist John Phillips witnessed the execution of Laszlo Bardosi, Hungary's fascist ex-prime minister. Power failures delayed proceedings, and the method of execution was changed last minute from a hanging to a firing squad. Bardosi, defiant and unrepentant, refused to blindfold and made a final declaration before being swiftly killed by four gendarmes. Badursi's voice orated in a high-pitched rasp. "God save Hungary from all these bandits." I think he started to say something else, but a ragged tattoo of shots drowned it. The impact threw him back against the sandbags, and he pitched to his left in a pirouette, falling on the ground with his ankles neatly crossed. He was dead before the sound of guns at 2 meters could have reached him. Despite the solemn and clinical reality, public gossip quickly distorted the event, turning it into a mythologized spectacle, much to Lee's frustration. The experience epitomized the surreal mix of brutality and theater Lee was witnessing across post-war Europe. Although officially reporting for Vogue, her travels seemed increasingly erratic. Even her editor, Harry Yoxall, began to question the value of her work as expenses piled up and publishable material declined. In truth, Lee was drifting, driven more by her inner restlessness and emotional turmoil than professional purpose. She was on the run from herself. In early 1946, Lee Miller left Chepsy and set out for Romania with John Phillips and driver Giles Schultz. Driving through the flat Hungarian plains into the wooded foothills of the Transylvanian Alps, Lee was enchanted by Romania's beauty and cultural richness. Her article for Vogue described snow-blanketed landscapes, vibrant folk traditions, and whimsical signage using painted symbols instead of words. However, the journey took a dire turn outside Sibiu. Lee lost control of the car on icy roads and crashed into a snowbank. Russian soldiers tried but failed to recover the vehicle, and when the group returned, they found it ransacked and stripped of its wheels. Forced to abandon it, they found a replacement car and continued. In Bucharest, Lee reunited with an old friend and musicologist, Harry Broner. Suffering from fibrosis, she sought a folk remedy, being massaged by a trained Carpathian bear. After an arduous search, they found one at a rural village. To crowds of onlookers, the bear gently walked on and sat on Lee's back, giving her an eccentric but effective massage.
Okay, hang on. What is going on? So for Brostis, that is an historical use. We would call that fibromyalgia, chronic condition, widespread musculoskeletal pain, fatigue,
Yeah.
and other symptoms like sleep disturbances and cognitive difficulties. So she gets what? Who massages her? What massages her?
A bear.
A
So
bear?
on her previous trips to Romania, her and Roland had seen these Roma people with these dancing bears, and the bears would give people massages by walking on their back or like sitting on their back and shuffling up and down. And so Lee, in all her eccentricities, was like, the only thing that can cure me is a massage from one of these bears. But so many of the Roma people had been driven out or captured by the Nazis or, just couldn't find them, that it was very difficult for her to find one of these bears. And she found one and she got her bear massage and she felt a lot better.
Amazing. I have to say something. I have to interrupt. His feet are light and nimble. He never sleeps. He says that he will never die. He dances in light and in shadow, and he is a great favorite. He never sleeps, the judge. He is dancing, dancing. He says that he will never die. It's the end of Blood Meridian, and then there's a dancing bear, I believe, in that scene too. Anyway,
Was
Cool.
that just off the dome?
No, no, no. That's over
No.
here.
Oh,
That's
you
over
looked it
here.
up.
No,
Okay.
no, no. I looked
All
it up. I wish it was off. Actually, I don't want to memorize those lines.
right.
I don't need that put into my head like a curse. Uh, yeah. In any case, that's what I think about when you talk about a
A
kind of a
dancing
pet,
bear.
a bear that gives massages. You know,
Yeah, and it was
it yeah.
like a 300-pound bear or something like that. And so it
I
was
imagine they
gave her a
would
back massage.
declaw it and defang it and right, and it must be they probably put a muzzle over it too. Like, I mean, I would
Mm.
imagine there would be safety. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, a bear who gives you a massage now means something else in our culture. Uh,
Yeah, no, that wasn't what she meant.
I see. Good. Makes sense.
Emotionally, Lee was crumbling. She was exhausted, physically ill, and creatively blocked. Her wartime excitement was gone, her relationship strained, and she was out of money. The latest in a long line of unanswered letters from Roland Penrose was likely to be the last. He had despaired of continuously sending letters chasing after her and never getting so much as a flicker of a response. The only way he could get any news of Lee was to keep pestering Audrey Withers. When he and Lee had pledged to never allow their love for each other to impinge on their individual freedom, this wall of silence was not what he had in mind. By now, he had been snubbed too long and found he was drawn towards a permanent relationship with another woman. He firmly stated that unless his last letter received a reply, he would assume that Lee was not returning. It is doubtful that Lee would have responded to this threat, but for a cablegram from Dave Sherman, Kathleen McCoglin, seeking to warn Lee of her rival's presence in Downshire Hill, managed to go to telephone Dave in New York. Tracking Lee down through John Phillips, Dave had cabled from New York, "Go home." More than a week elapsed before the reply came. "Okay." If a telegram could convey a tone of voice, then this one would have exuded total resentment. Lee returned to Paris, traveling mainly by rail. People who knew or who had heard of the fabulous beauty of Lee Miller were staggered by this red-eyed, haggard apparition that confronted them. She had contracted a disease which blistered her lips and made her gums bleed almost continuously. Her complexion was pasty and her blonde hair lank. Whenever she tried to do anything intricate, her hands shook from exhaustion. She stayed only long enough to collect a few things from the hotel screen before traveling on to London. Lee and Roland were quickly reconciled. The rival departed amicably, and Lee set about trying to recover both her health and her life. Late one evening, Roland was indulging Lee with one of her greatest passions, massaging her feet. Lee murmured, "Darling, that's wonderful. It gives me such calm. If someone had massaged Hitler's feet like that, there would have been no massacres." "Whoever would have done that?" Roland asked incredulously.
That's a theory I've never heard. Yeah.
Well, so Roland asked whoever would have done that, and Lee replied, "Mary Magdalene." Back in London on his way to France, Dave helped her through the usual agonies at the start of writing the Romanian story. Before she could finish, he had to leave to take up his job in Paris. Timmy O'Brien took over the invigilation, dispensing whiskey and comfort in equal quantities. The article was acclaimed, and Vogue ran it in the May 1946 issue as a big spread using 10 photographs, two of them full page. It was the swan song of Lee's days of high adventure. In the summer of 1946, Lee Miller and Roland Penrose flew to the US, taking advantage of the new air services. Their first stop was Lee's family home in Poughkeepsie, where she hadn't been in 12 years. The rarity of Lee's letters home left them guessing about her new lover. Theodore Miller had housed some of Roland's collection of paintings for the duration of the war, including a few of his own works, so the prospect of meeting the originator of these outlandish pictures added to their curiosity. Not for a minute did this natural inquisitiveness get in the way of the effusive welcome Lee's parents gave Roland. It was quite evident to them that he adored Lee and she him, and that she seemed carefree and happy, but a touch of reserve lingered in the air. In New York, Vogue hosted a celebration for Lee, but the hotel restrictions kept the couple in his. So, Vogue hosted a celebration for Lee, but the hotel that they had put them up in New York, the Sheraton, would not allow them to stay in the same room. There were women's quarters and men's quarters. So then a friend of theirs, Julian Levy, offered them his art-filled apartment. The Vogue party sparked a flurry of social events and introductions, including Alfred Barr, whose works in creating the Museum of Modern Art made a tremendous impact on Roland, giving vital encouragement to his early ideas for founding the Institute of Contemporary Arts in London. They then traveled to Los Angeles, reuniting with Eric and Maffei. Eric had endured a long period of out of work, and Maffei's health had been severely damaged by a tropical disease. Their luck had begun to change in 1941 when Eric got a job at the Lockheed Aircraft Corporation as a photographer. By now, he'd built a distinguished reputation with his aircraft shots, which combined the best of the dramatic and the aesthetic. Los Angeles was full of old friends and new. In the old part of Hollywood off Vine Street, Man Ray had his studio in a courtyard where palm trees and flowers grew in profusion. The atmosphere of the quiet oasis, only a few paces away from the hustle of Hollywood, had strong similarities with the Paris he had fled after the German occupation in 1940. Man Ray's attention was now concentrated on his painting to the virtual exclusion of photography. His success was increased by the unexpected discovery that he was an excellent and provocative lecturer. About this time, Man Ray had married Juliet Browner, a dark-eyed, slender girl, in a double ceremony shared with Max Ernst and Dorothea Tanning, and the two couples were each other's witnesses. Man Ray was American. So he'd met Lee in Paris, but he was American and he was Jewish as well, which explained why he left Paris and went back to America during World War II. It was not until March 1947 that Lee undertook her next assignment for Vogue. It was a fashion and celebrity story set in St. Moritz, where high society people were flocking to the ski slopes for the first time since the war. Princesses, playboys, and fashion designers mixed together on the slopes. Lee had traveled there by rail with Vogue writer Peggy Riley, and though she was delighted to be working again, an unexpected complication arose, which she describes in one of the few letters she actually posted to Roland. Darling, this is a hell of a romantic way to tell you that I'll shortly be knitting little clothes for a little man, but it seems to be true. I feel rather peculiar about it, both physically and emotionally. Physically, it's heavy and lethargic making. The morning sickness is probably nothing to do with it, as I've always had it anyway, but emotionally I'm very pleased. So far, no resentment or anguish or mind-changing or panic, only a mild astonishment that I'm so happy about it. I've had to tell Peggy, as otherwise she wouldn't understand my insistence on returning so immediately to London when the job isn't really through, leaving her in the lurch on her first story. She's madly pleased about it and cherishes me like mad, worried that the prenatal influences of three-legged tripods will be bad. We're so preoccupied with that damn instrument and losing it always, so we're both fearful that Junior will be born with 3 legs. Let me know how you feel about being a parent. Sure you want it? And why? There is only one thing. My workroom is not going to be a nursery. How about your studio? Haha. Darling, love you. We'll telephone London tonight or tomorrow. Love, Lee. The pregnancy was far from easy, and its early complications were not helped by a move in March across the street to a larger house, 36 Downshire Hill. It was the famous 1947 winter, one of the coldest ever. Wind whistled up through the cracks in the uncarpeted floor, coal was still rationed, and the only fuel to be had was meager supplies from log and peat vendors in the street. Roland resorted to burning old canvas stretchers, frames, and wooden bases from his sculptures. As Lee's confinement drew closer, her principles began to take a more conventional shift. During the war years, few of Aziz's letters had got through, and after the war, those that arrived were invariably pleading for answers to previous letters. This was not without some justification, because in his enormous generosity, he'd passed over to Leah controlling interest in his 2 most important businesses. Without her to sign papers or to give him power of attorney, he was powerless to resist a boardroom coup to oust him. He lost a fortune, and of course, so did Lee. Despite his ruin, Aziz bore no malice towards Lee, and at the earliest opportunity, he travelled to London. That month at 36 Downshire Hill was an unusual household, even by surrealist standards. Valentine had arrived, and in the evening would sit down to supper round a card table at the foot of Lee's bed with Roland and Aziz, who held everyone enchanted with tales as fantastic as those in the Arabian Nights. Aziz could not have been more affectionate or generous to Lee. He had unfailingly given her everything he could during their marriage, and now the moment had come for his last gift, Lee's official freedom. He stood before her as she laid in bed, and using his prerogative under Islamic law, he recited steadily, I divorce thee, I divorce thee, I divorce thee, thus terminating 13 years of what must have been one of the world's strangest marriages.
King of the simps. We found him, boys. Controlling interest of the two companies. King of the simps. Like, he had real things to lose and lost them
Oh,
in a
yeah.
foolish way, too.
Yes.
Like, not a, what a dummy. Like, yeah, keep control so that you can give her all the money, but just keep control. What, I mean, holy crazy. What, did I read that, uh, she and Picasso may have been lovers, but we don't know. I think I've read that. In any
I
event,
mean, they all had these sort of like trips to the south of France where they were like staying in a villa and everyone was walking around topless and stuff. So, maybe, but probably not in a significant way.
sure, sure. What happens in Nice stays in Nice. Uh wow.
Yeah.
That is these guys. That is
I mean, we
gnarly.
are talking about the guy who divorced one of the five most beautiful women in the world
True.
on a whim.
True. And you get the impression too that like he's not ruined like on the street, right?
No,
I think he
no.
probably still had,
I mean, he
a
can still
quality.
afford to go to London to do this
Sure,
in-person
exactly.
divorcing.
Right, right. So ruined, oh, I only have $15 million now, that is if we ever need to change hosts on the podcast again, Abby, the protocol will be I divorce thee. I divorce thee. I'm not gonna say it. Not gonna say it. That is funny though. Fun, fun. Is that? I wonder if that's still true under Islamic law. I wonder if you
I
could
have
still
no
do.
idea. I don't
Feels like
know.
something has. It feels like something has to be put in writing.
Yeah, I would say probably not, right? Like,
Hmm.
or you would
I don't know.
have two like different types of ceremonies that would mean that
Sure, and maybe
there
that
has to
just
be something.
means. Well, maybe it just means to. I don't know. We're just pure speculation, but it means that he started it and then eventually it's formalized
Yeah.
somehow in other ways. But okay, in any event, what a guy.
But he had said at one point, I think, that he had not wanted to divorce her until he knew that she had security, which is also why he'd given her all of this, like these assets and things. Because as she'd said, she wanted freedom and security, and Aziz was nothing if not giving Lee what she wanted.
Yeah, it's so tricky because here. Let me ask you this: is that true love? Does he really love her, or is he just wants to be a martyr to her? Maybe it is. I don't know.
Maybe it is. I don't know. He was 17 years older than her.
So there's that kind of daddy, kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. Okay. Age gap.
Age gap.
Sometimes the younger woman.
Actually, no, no, no. Man Ray was 17 years
Oh,
older
Man
than
Ray
her.
was okay. Well, there you go.
Aziz was 20 something years older than her.
Well, there you are. So double age, extra age gap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes the younger woman in a dynamic like these, sometimes the woman in her 20s is the predator on the man in his 40s. Okay. Okay.
Sometimes you just have to be very flippant and freedom loving and no holds barred, I guess.
We shall say no more on the matter.
We should say no more on the matter. A few days after their quiet wedding at a Hampstead registry office, witnessed only by two close friends, Lee and Roland returned home to find a beautifully calligraphed envelope waiting for Lee, now Mrs. Penrose. Inside was a whimsical love letter from Roland made of three spelling game cards, I, O, and U, the ace of diamonds, a foil heart, and a torn page reading simply, and love Roland. Pregnancy gave Lee the perfect excuse to indulge both her hypochondria and her imagination. She developed sudden, urgent passions. First for an axolotl, and then for hedgehogs. Not just one, but an entire family. She insisted Roland fetch them from the countryside, convinced that if he failed, the baby would be born prickly. He complied, returning with a basket of hedgehogs, which Lee quickly lost interest in, and then she decided they were suffering. Roland dutifully released them on Hampstead Heath. Despite her long-held distaste for children, Lee gave birth to a healthy baby boy on the 9th of September 1947. Delivered by cesarean at the London clinic, Anthony William Roland. First nicknamed Butch for his pugnacious features, he was later renamed Tony at Lee's insistence. I don't want him growing into a thug, she explained. For a time, Lee basked in the glamour of early motherhood, enthroned in her nursing home bed with nurses at her command. Lee's account of this period, published in Vogue in April 1948, was typically ironic and extravagant take on maternity. She mocked the drab official checklist from the nursing home, replacing it with her own lush recommendations. Caviar, smoked trout, French dressing, Nescafe, and a loaned Picasso to hang on the wall. Her white hospital bed became a symbol of safety and indulgence, but also a platform for her performative flair. Once home, real motherhood quickly lost its charm. Fortunately, Annie Clements, the ever-reliable nanny, took care of Tony, leaving Lee free to return to work. Her first assignment covering the Venice Biennale for Vogue. Her report blended biting wit with painterly insight. She described young Italian artists and sculptors with affection and style, but reserved her deepest admiration for Henry Moore, stocky, un-Latin, serious and simple, whose sculptures had just won a major prize. That summer, Lee's parents, Theodore and Florence, made their first trip to post-war England, moved by Lee's tales of rationing. Florence smuggled in silk stockings hidden between pages of books. Their visit was marked by Tony's first steps and a series of charming excursions, ending with Theodore's droll endorsement, "This is all not half as bad as we expected it to be." Roland, meanwhile, was chasing a long-held dream, to be a farmer. Though he'd once imagined a poet's life in rural Ireland, the demands of the London art world kept him close to the city. After an exhaustive search, he and Lee stumbled upon Farley Farm, 120 acres in a tiny hamlet called Muddles Green. Despite its bleak appearance, Roland saw its potential. They purchased it at auction, enchanted by its alignment with the Long Man of Wilmington and the constellation of Orion, symbols that to them felt protective and auspicious. Roland, aware of his inexperience, hired help to manage both the land and the house. A farm manager, a pair of gardeners, a cook housekeeper named Paula, and eventually her daughter Patsy, who replaced Annie as Tony's carer. All joined the household. Staff numbers grew to near Victorian levels, but Lee's innate sociability kept everything warm and familial. Her egalitarian charm was genuine, never patronizing, and she treated everyone with the same directness, whether she was in a good mood or not. Though she never dug in the dirt herself, Lee became an authoritative garden supervisor. She read extensively in secret and soon became a quiet powerhouse in local horticultural circles. Her curiosity, intellect, and flair for performance translated seamlessly into this new, earthier arena. Farley Farm was becoming more than a retreat. It was a canvas for their eccentric, creative lives. Early years of Lee's marriage to Roland were among her happiest, as she enjoyed both security and freedom, which she loves, while actively participating in the modern art scene through Roland's newly established Institute of Contemporary Arts. She contributed insightful writing to Vogue, including a notable 1949 article for an influential exhibition on primitive art's impact on modern artists. Lee undertook challenging Vogue fashion shoots, such as a demanding trip to Sicily with models and crew, but her interest waned despite professional success. Feeling depressed by the routine, she found solace in projects that connected her with friends in arts and literature, although she often relied on her assistant to keep her on track. Farley Farm soon took on the air of perpetual art congress. Both Lee and Roland loved entertaining. For them, the company of friends brought the satisfaction and stimulation that nothing else could provide. Art was vital and had to be lived and shared, otherwise, it became academic, sterile, and as good as dead. They both enjoyed creating the kind of atmosphere in which new ideas and projects could be spawned, and the eclectic assemblies of weekend guests were an agreeable extension of the idea. The goings on were observed with interest by the locals, who found that, with only slight exaggeration, they could regale each other with tales of nude dancing on the lawn, plenty of laughter interspersed with violent quarrels, incomprehensible pictures adorning the walls, and weird salutes sprouting in the garden. People in foreign clothes who chatted in foreign tongues. Man Ray was one of the few visitors to be taken seriously because he appeared on a BBC TV's Monitor series with Hugh Weldon. Lee was unaware of the unusual qualities of her menage. She loved her role as hostess, particularly with Patsy and Paula to help her, because tormenting her accomplices was always a special component of her creativity.
I think that's so funny that bit about Man Ray being the only one being taken seriously because the BBC he had appeared on some BBC thing. It's so true, even to this day. I mean, as absurd as it is, it's like, oh, he was on Joe Rogan. You know, he's a real person. It's like
Yeah.
this is a real. It's bizarre how media works.
But Picasso was also like quite a regular visitor to Farley Farm. And
Hmm.
there's all sorts of stories about him having a great relationship with the young Tony. And I think there's a book, a children's book called The Boy Who Bit Picasso, and it's about Tony biting him in one of their
On
play
the
fights.
on the After Dark for patrons, I've decided I'm going to go a little more deeply into Lee Miller and Picasso because Picasso was my beat, and of course I
Yeah.
did the best I could in the 5 hours on Picasso, but I don't think I touched on the Lee Miller moment. So I can I do 5 or 10 minutes on that, Abby?
Yeah, of course. Yes, please do.
Cool. The
Um,
horniest artist who ever lived, Pablo Picasso.
Man Ray once remarked that regardless of what Lee was doing, she could make more work for other people than anyone else he knew. The sight of others sitting around idle was unbearable to her. She insisted that they be involved in some task under her direction with enormous ingenuity, invented schemes to keep everyone occupied. With a perceptive candor that could be mistaken for offbeat humor, she wrote about her scheme, Working Guests, in Vogue's July 1953 number. Cooking was emerging as her new meter, and it had the understandable attraction that it was far more sociable and less solitary than an occupation than the combined flagellation of herself and her typewriter keyboard. In spite of the copious bonhomie of Farley's, Lee was happiest in London. The house at Downshire Hill had been sold, and during the week, Lee and Roland now lived in a small flat in Kensington. Its size was no drawback, as when not at school, Tony was happily established at Farley's with Patsy. The flat was looked after by Elsa Fletcher, a quiet, genial woman who soon became unswervingly devoted to Lee and Lee to her. The flat was Lee's refuge, and Elsa her confidant and vital source of sympathy and understanding. By 1955, Lee was in the grip of a vicious downward spiral that nearly killed her. Following the birth of Tony, she had suddenly found herself unable to get any pleasure from sex. She was also rapidly losing her looks. Her face no longer had its firmness. Wrinkles and folds were proliferating from her eye. The wrinkles and folds were proliferating, and her eyes were becoming puffy. Her hair was getting thinner and lifeless. The fat was piling on, making her body look coarse and bulky. To make matters worse, the woman who had once been described as a snappy dresser was fast becoming a slob. She would turn up to smart dinner parties in scruffy or unsuitable clothes, calf-high stockings under a knee-length skirt, or an ill-fitting suit jacket worn over slacks. But all the vicissitudes of age, it was the deterioration of her face that wounded Lee the most and drove her to a painful facelift and ill-fitting wigs. Roland, on the other hand, was on the springboard of his career. The ICA was making a contribution that was changing the whole ethos of contemporary art in Britain. Success followed success, and recognition was coming from all quarters. On top of that, the irony was that age had improved his looks. To add to the other strains of the period, Lee's chosen method of giving up smoking created extra problems. She'd become accustomed to around 50 cigarettes a day. It was a miracle that she never burned houses to the ground with her technique of keeping several lit cigarettes on the go, simultaneously smoldering in ashtrays or perched on the edges of furniture. In the middle of a cigarette one night at the restaurant Chez Anna near the Trocadero, she announced she was going to stop smoking forthwith. For the next year or more, life was absolute hell for her and those around her as she rode out the withdrawal symptoms. It is hardly surprising that Lee became difficult and quarrelsome, and that those closest to her in the firing line became the target for venomous vituperation. The vicious feud began between her and Tony. Neither missed an opportunity to snipe at the other with the knowledge that they both knew exactly where to hit to inflict the most damage. Attacks and counterattacks were sparked off over trivia, and the opponents pressed home on their targets with relentless ingenuity. The obvious result was that Tony transferred all his affections to Patsy. Enormous quantities of whiskey exasperated all of Lee's problems and tightened the spiral. Lee drank because she felt unloved, and she was unloved because she drank. Roland found the crisis incomprehensible, mainly because Lee took care not to allow anyone the opportunity to completely understand her. She wallowed in her own misery, reveling in the prolonged bout of self-laceration and wreaking a hateful vengeance on anyone within reach. In 1954, the publisher Victor Gollancz commissioned Roland to write Picasso his life and work. This was another blow to Lee. Christ, how can you write, she said. You can't even spell to save your life. But the hurt was deep as she recognized that her own talent was becoming so swiftly eclipsed. Roland's acceptance of the post as director of fine arts for the British Council in Paris served only to plunge her into further fits of depression. The long stays in Paris were spent in the luxury of borrowed apartments, and their social life was an incessant round of parties. 10 years previously, this would have delighted Lee, but now she hated it. For the first time in her life, she felt she had become an appendage to someone else and no longer controlled her own destiny. Center stage, even here in Paris, now belonged to Roland. At the eye
Oh,
of
just
this,
the incessant round of parties in Paris is devastating me. Oh, I mean, like, it's like, if this is
but
poverty, give me chastity.
there is a difference between an incessant round of parties where you are the young, beautiful center of attention, and the incessant round of parties where everyone just wants to talk to your previously quiet Quaker husband.
I wouldn't know,
And
but I
those
can imagine. I would
and
not
and
know,
those
Abbie, but
people
I
that
can
want to talk
imagine.
to him, those people that want to talk to him are beautiful young things.
Are you telling me that young women are the center of attention, but then established, successful, middle-aged men then come into their power? Is that what you're telling me, Abby?
What? No.
Good. Well, you hear that voice? You got a reason to stay alive and go to the gym, fellas. Take my word.
Or, as we said in the Picasso episode, and now I will say it again in the Lee Miller episode, or establish some modern art.
Yes. Yeah. If you have some success in the arts as you mature as a man, you will be amply rewarded. I have heard.
At the eye of this private hurricane was the fact that Roland had fallen in love with an acrobat from the flying trapeze, Diane Dariaz. Diane's beautiful face, with her piercing blue eyes and massive golden curls, was solar in appearance and radiated energy. At first, Lee had encouraged this affair, feeling confident that it was just another of Roland's passing amours. Then suddenly she saw Diane as a threat. Benign permissive tolerance was reversed, and Lee became bitterly and openly hostile. The quarrels were devastating and swirled around her and Roland like a maelstrom. In between outbursts, Lee would make an effort to tough it out, but her own self-confidence was too badly shattered to be able to shrug this one off. Her hatred was far too consuming to allow her to grasp that it was Diane who was protecting her. Despite Roland's repeated entreaties, Diane steadfastly refused to marry him, but Lee could never believe this and saw her only as a deadly rival. For Lee, Roland's sexual affairs mattered little, and following the loss of her own sexuality, she actively encouraged him to have other women. The pain came from being forced to share his love. She felt isolated from everyone around her. Valentine, Patsy, Diane, and many other talented, adoring women formed an admiring side around Roland. Lee was the outsider who was always drunk, untidy, and in the wrong. Tony was becoming increasingly distant. Casual remarks like, please ask Patsy to meet me from the school train because if Mummy comes, I'm not sure I'll recognize her, left deep, invisible wounds. Later in his teenage years, their relationship was to degenerate into open hostilities at every opportunity. By now, the winged serpents were rampant and had saturated Lee's consciousness. But with her horror of mental illness, she denied herself professional help and understanding. All forms of physical illnesses fascinated her, but she was repelled and frightened by the merest suggestion that she might be suffering from psychological problems. The winged serpents held her in a relentless grip. In the nadir of her depression, she confessed to Nanette that the only reason preventing her from drowning herself in the Seine was that she knew Roland and Tony would be so happy without her. As an aside from this, it also turned out she was being surveilled by MI5. Uh, this is from the Independent newspaper published in 2009. Today, a new and no less remarkable chapter in Miller's life will be uncovered. The American-born photographer who lived in Britain during and after the Second World War was placed under minute surveillance by MI5, even as she went about documenting some of the war's worst horrors, according to intelligence reports revealed by the National Archive. For much of the 1940s and 1950s, intelligence operators intercepted Miller's post and kept a close eye on her circle of artistic friends, which the security services believed had strong communist sympathies. In justifying their spying, a special branch report written in 1941 concluded that the beautiful photographer who once had an affair with the surrealist painter Man Ray was an eccentric who indulged in queer food and queer clothes and needed to be watched carefully. The entry said, she is regarded as an intellectual communist and theoretical political student, and the managing director of Condé Nast Productions Limited, Mr. H.W. Yoxall, has chafed her about it. Mr. Yoxall states that Miller is eccentric and indulges in queer foods and queer clothes, etc. Miller first began to attract the interest of the intelligence service's communist hunters because her second husband, Roland Penrose, was deemed to be sympathetic towards Stalin's Russia. She also had a close friendship with Wilfred McCartney, a former Communist International member who was jailed for 10 years in 1925 for spying on the Russians. Described in the intelligence reports as violently anti-Nazi, Miller, whose real name was Elizabeth Miller Eloui, that's her Egyptian married name, was eventually deemed to not constitute any threat. The general opinion is that her communism is more a mental outlook than anything, and I have obtained no information that she is associated with any particular subversive organization, one officer concluded. That MI5 kept tabs on Miller reveals how even those who were perceived to have been true patriots during the Second World War were deemed suspicious as fear of communism gripped the West in the post-war era.
I mean, let's be realistic though. I mean, if you were an artist in Paris and London during this period, the post-war period, it would be impossible not to mix with a communist at some point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, if your life is one endless party and you're in the arts, so I mean, you know,
you can expect MI5.
I think so.
In the twilight of her life, Lee's final jag was cooking. From the Apollo magazine in 2020. Embedded in the splashback above the Aga in the kitchen at Farley's is a tile designed by Picasso. Not the best place to keep a Picasso, perhaps, but then again, the couple liked to live among the art that they had accumulated and acquired, and Miller lived most happily in the kitchen. It feels appropriate then that the tile depicts a simple smiling face, a grinning household god, or perhaps a reminder to Miller of the guests, Picasso among them, that she had entertained so generously with her cooking. Cooking was the grounds for Miller's final and perhaps most fulfilling reinvention. Less well known until recently was the comfort and purpose that she found in later decades through food. Cooking is pure therapy, she once said. Cooking rooted Miller at Farley's, at least at the weekends when she and Penrose rolled in from London with yet another flock of house guests. There she cultivated a vast vegetable garden and drew on the resources of the dairy farm, the latter providing rich treats for visitors from London wary of post-war rationing. We try to share the blessing of our farm with pop-eyed guests, she wrote, who clamor to forget that purists don't follow one creamy dish with another. For all that it grounded her, food was also a continual quest for Miller. From the recipe competitions she entered and frequently won in the 1960s to her efforts to recreate, by flavor memory alone, a rice pudding she had tasted in Egypt before the war, She took an experimental omnivorous approach that carried something of an American pragmatism and proactivity into the kitchen. Miller's family and friends teased her about her fondness for gadgets, which in her extensive armory included a running bean slicer and an ice pet ice shaver. Among the plays that Penrose would write for the farm staff, family, and other guests to perform just before Christmas was The Revenge of the Muddles Master, in which a marvelous machine got the hots for Miller's deep freeze. That's not to say that Miller was a Heath Robinson of the home front. Her knowledge of techniques, nutrition, and international cuisine, coupled with relentless research, transformed her into what might be termed a practical food historian. In the late 1950s, she trained in Paris for 6 months in cordon bleu cookery, and by the late 1960s, Penrose had erected a library to contain her ever-growing cache of cookbooks. She often consulted dozens of these in planning a single dish and copied out more than 1,200 flavored recipes into small notebooks. She planned ahead carefully and was savvy about preserves and not letting ingredients go to waste, and embraced the convenience of the deep freeze. All the planning that went into meals was, as it seemed, a counterpoint to the capricious nature of the many house guests, as well as to Miller's private turmoil. At times, as she well knew, the drink would take over, and when it did, instructions would be in place for Patsy Murray, the nanny-turned-housekeeper, to pick up the pieces. Above all, though, Miller was determined to gratify and even inspire her guests. She devised special dishes for artists, such as sesame chicken for Mito, and satisfied Picasso's cravings to sample the English Christmas pudding. It is not such a leap to describe Miller's cooking as an art, and one that was frequently performed for artists and other cultural figures. The visual appeal of dishes and their presentation on the table were of paramount importance to her. Some, such as the oft-noted cauliflower breasts, took up the friskiness of surrealism, but there would also be mischief in their titles and ingredients. Green Goddess guacamole became Green Bitch with the addition of Angostura rum. The mellowing of age had drawn Lee and Roland closer together. Roland's work gave him more and more opportunity to travel, and Lee joined him on some of these trips. Of the many places ostensibly visited for the high-minded cultural reasons, Lee particularly enjoyed Czechoslovakia and Japan. Her great delight was to slip away and eat at both famous and obscure restaurants. Whenever possible, after the meal, she would barge into the kitchen to exchange recipes with the chef, and nothing pleased her more than to return home with yet another pile of cookbooks and a lot of strange things in tins. Through all these travels, she hardly took any photographs. The Rolleiflexes gathered dust in the cupboard, and the subject of photography hardly raised a flicker of interest. No one could induce her to resume taking pictures. She would firmly brush aside all suggestions of even family snaps by saying, "You can't just be an amateur once you've been a professional." Secretly, she had purchased a Honeywell Pentax, which, with its built-in light meter and compact size, must have appealed to her love of technology, but she seldom used it. Many assignments were planned and offered to her, but the only one of importance that she accepted was to photograph the Catalan artist Antoni Tapes at work at his studio. The photographs have every bit the perception and style of the early days and compellingly evoke the atmosphere of Tapes' surroundings. Lee's attitude to her previous work baffled everyone. People would come from the great museums requesting loans for exhibitions and books. If they wanted a photograph by Steichen or Man Ray, she would oblige by rummaging through the battered cardboard boxes that contained beautiful original prints. She would declare, her pride tinged with regret, "I am now the last person left alive who was there at the time," and launch off into wonderful tales of her life and times. Her attitude to her own work was quite different. All requests for access to it were politely and firmly deflected. To the most persistent of questioners, she would say that everything had been destroyed in the war, always adding that it was of no interest anyway and best forgotten. Her disparagement of her own achievements was so intense that everyone was convinced that she had done little or no work of significance. "Oh, I did take a few pictures, but that was a long time ago," she would say. Although she would never admit it, most of her old negatives lay totally neglected in odd corners of Farley's and more in the vaults of Vogue magazine in London. For her, that whole part of her life was now a closed chapter. She had absolutely no interest in her past